and a comedy duo called Smosh wanted to make an animation channel, and they were looking for one show that was female-driven out of their many shows. So this producer asked if I'd like to pitch to them. I quickly put together a pitch of Pubertina as a web series, and they gave me the green light, which meant giving me about $30,000 to produce 10 episodes, all on my own, and which sounds like a lot of money, but it really is not. And so at the time I was titmousing, and I made friends with some of the animators, and I ended up hiring my animation friend Josh, who sat next to me, to animate Pubertina and eventually do the storyboards. And then as time went on, I had to bring on more and more animators and artists because it was about a 3-week turnaround for the shorts, which is very short. I had to do everything from writing the script to recording the dialogue, writing songs and music and storyboarding, backgrounds, compositing, animation, you name it. So that really became like my boot camp for animation production, and it was a lot of fun, but it was also very stressful trying to make the deadline. Sometimes I would upload a video very last minute, like a few hours before it had to go up. But it was a lot of fun, and I basically had no notes from anyone. So I was able to do what I wanted to do, which is, as I learned later, you don't get that opportunity very often in the industry. And so then, because of Pubertina, I started getting invited to pitch shows because it became popular, somewhat infamous, because there were a lot of 10-year-old boys watching it who were uncomfortable and sending me a lot of hate mail. But there were a lot of girls who loved it, and gay guys. People who had helped come out of the closets, there were gay characters in it. And studio executives saw the potential through Pubertina in me. And so the first show I sold was to Fox ADHD, which was this short-lived Fox late night program. And I sold them a show called Breakfast Town, which was not, I pitched 3 ideas, and it was the idea I thought they wouldn't choose. Breakfast Town was like Twin Peaks, if you know that show, but everyone was obsessed with breakfast. And then I was invited to pitch at places like Disney, Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, and I sold a show around the same time to each of those studios, different show. And when I say sell, I don't mean they made the show. I mean, I sold it so they had the option to develop it with me. And also at the time, I was realizing that as far as my career went, I really wasn't a storyboard artist. I kind of sucked. I was okay at drawing, but I just didn't have like the spatial awareness and perspective that you needed to do that kind of cinematic drawing. So I had been testing for board tests on shows like Adventure Time, Regular Show, Flapjack, and although I got some very nice feedback, they were like, yeah, no. And then I didn't even know there were writers in animation, but when I realized that there were a few writers staffed on every show, that's the road I kind of went down. And I got hired as a staff writer on my first show in about 2013, 2014, on a show called Star versus the Forces of Evil at Disney. Darren FC, the creator, was a fan of Pubertina, and she just gave me a chance. Because I was pretty green, pretty new to writing for animation. So I was very lucky to have that experience. And then after that, it was easier to get jobs, and I started writing scripts for shows like Teen Titans Go, Unikitty, DC Superhero Girls. I landed another staff job at DreamWorks TV on a show called Home Adventures of Tip and O. I was on that show for a while. And then I was invited to pitch on a property called the Harvey Girls, which were these old Harvey comics that DreamWorks owned and that they had the rights to. So they had a lot of people pitch on this, and they decided to go with my vision. So I developed that with them, and then it got green lit, and I then became the showrunner. It's my first time showrunning. In about 3 months or so, through kind of reasons outside my control, I was laid off by DreamWorks and replaced with someone else as showrunner on my show, which is kind of a brutal reality of this industry. That kind of stuff does happen. And that was probably my lowest point in my career emotionally, because I couldn't have imagined that that would happen to me. But then I started getting hired to write on Hilda, which is an awesome show, as you probably know. And they ended up hiring me as the head writer for season 3 because the showrunners liked my work so much. And that was a really fun experience, brainstorming those episodes, because we were done translating Luke Pearson's books to screen, so we had to come up with new stories with Luke, and that was a lot of fun. And then I rolled off of that to a show called Big Nate at Nickelodeon. That was a show based on Big Nate comic strips, and I was head writer on that. And meanwhile, I pitched a show called Goldie. Well, let me backtrack. I made a short called Goldie. I produced an independent short because I was so sick of getting my shows into development and then not being able to use them again because the studios just would hold on to them, because I didn't want you to do anything with them, and to buy back your property is a lot of money, because you basically have to pay them back for whatever money they incurred in development, hiring artists and whatnot. So I wanted to have something that was just my own, and at the time, it was 2016, something in the political climate made me feel kind of squashed as a woman, and I wanted to create a character that was a girl who took up space. That was kind of like what my heart wanted to do. So I naturally thought a giant girl would take up a lot of space, and I wrote a short script and decided to produce the short with some of that DreamWorks money that they had to pay me when they laid me off. So yeah, and I want to show you guys that short because my biggest successes have been when I've made a proof of concept short and then pitched with that, along with that. So Pubertina, they had seen the student film, and Goldie, which I successfully sold, I had this short. So I'm going to show you guys that. I produced that short, and I cobbled together a little crew that was basically people I had worked with before, who I was pulling in favors from, and I hired the animator, and I submitted it to a bunch of festivals because I didn't want it to pitch with it just as a have it just be a proof of concept that I used to pitch with. I really wanted to enjoy it as a short and kind of let it be seen by the world, because that was kind of what I was lacking with having all these secret projects in development. So it did end up getting into quite a few festivals around the world, and it won some awards. And so when I ended up pitching it kind of towards the end of that festival circuit, it already had, accolades and was something people knew about. Studio executives were passing it around and viewing it, and so when I pitched it to Apple, they had already seen it, so I was pitching it and liked it. So I was pitching it to a pretty warm room, receptive room, and luckily enough, they wanted to develop it, so I didn't even pitch it anywhere else. We just went with Apple, and kind of the rest is history, because now it's a show on Apple TV+. But you can please watch it. If you don't have Apple TV, you can get it for a month, binge Goldie, then cancel it, how it goes. But yeah, I'm very proud of it. We made a season, 13 22-minute episodes, so 26 11-minute stories. And then, since then, I have been mostly freelancing on different development projects that mostly are based on existing popular IPs, because that's what people feel comfortable with right now, is making shows that are based on something that's already popular. So I've been doing that, and my husband and I co-wrote a Peanuts special for Apple TV. And then I was feeling like right now is not a great time to pitch at this moment, because it is so hard and they're being so picky. And so I realized that I still needed to just make something. And I had this idea for a show called Strawberry Vampire that I had pitched to Apple a while back, but it was too weird for them. And I just wanted to, I finally wrote a pilot for it that I really loved, and I just thought, okay, I just want to make this. I want to make an animatic, I want to produce it, a full 11-minute pilot animatic, and I didn't have much money because it has been rough in the industry right now. But so I decided it was time to do a Kickstarter. I felt like I could ask people for money because I felt like I had earned it. And so I did a Kickstarter just to produce the animatic pilot. So it was about $8,000 that I was trying to raise. I didn't want to take the chance of making it too high, shooting too high, and it not getting funded. So I decided this was a good goal. And then, as it turns out, I am getting a scene animated, which is really cool. So it'll have one scene animated. And then I don't want to sell this to the studio. That's not my goal with this one. I just want to grow like an audience for it and kind of grow it slowly on my own and just have it be mine. So just to show you, there are different options out there now. It's becoming actually a lot more popular to indie produce things. And so you guys, I just locked this pilot animatic. The only people who've seen it are my family and a few other people. So I'm giving you a sneak peek of the animatic. That's my pilot. I really want to independently produce it somehow as a show. I have 2 more episodes already in writing, being written. So yeah, and now that I've told you all about me, I want to tell you about my book, which I have been writing over the past year or so. I've been in development so many times, and I feel like it's such an elusive process to people who don't have that experience. And so I thought I'd just put all my development secrets in a book and try to write it in a way that was easy to follow along with. And that became this book, A Guide to Developing Animated Shows. It's a comprehensive step-by-step guide to creating and developing original animated shows packed with practical tools, expert tips, and actionable worksheets. I wrote this little book and I really had no idea if people would like it or find it useful, but I've been getting some really amazing praise from a lot of showrunners. The most notable, I'd say, is Joe Brum, creator of Bluey. I never thought he would read my book, but he did, and he really loved it. And people are just saying that they wish veterans are saying they wish they had this kind of guide when they were starting out developing shows. So it's been really nice to see the feedback. You can get your copy outside, but also visit my website and you can subscribe to my mailing list and follow along with updates. So now I want to do a little mini workshop with you guys and kind of take you through the basic development steps. Not going to be as detailed as I go into in my book, but basically these are the main questions you have to ask yourself when you're developing a show. First, you have to ask yourself, what do you care about? What do I care about? Because believe it or not, if you sold a show that was about something you really weren't passionate about, it would be a headache to try to make that show and produce it and write about it. Because it takes years, as you know, animation takes a long time and it takes years to make a show. So you'd be stuck with this idea that you really don't know what to do with, and you'd be in hot water. So you really do want to think about what excites you, what ideas inspire you. You can draw experience from your life, like Strawberry Vampire is inspired by my own Hungarian family who were Jewish immigrants, Holocaust survivors, and they immigrated to the States in the 1940s and moved to California suburb. So that was really my inspiration. The show is kind of a love letter to them. You can draw from personal experiences, but you can also draw from movies you see, shows, articles you read, books. A lot of things can spark ideas. So then when you have that seed of an idea or that area you're passionate about, you have to ask yourself, what is the show? What is the show about? What's the premise? It's a very simple question, but it's actually not so easy because that premise has to drive a lot of stories. And then the third question you have to ask is, who is the show for? Unfortunately, when you're pitching to sell something, you do need to think about who your audience is. You don't want to have the executives you're pitching to or the people you're pitching to have to figure that out for you. You want to be clear on, who the show is created for. And then the last question, which I think a lot of people, not just people starting out, but experienced creators don't always think about is, why now? And that's kind of the question of, you don't want your show to feel like it's something better fit for the early 2000s, the time, or whatever. You want to look at the landscape now, think about the political, social, TV landscape, and think about how your idea fits into that, and if it's something fresh or not. And so I thought we'd just go through these steps with an idea like from the audience, and please don't give me your babies, like things you really care about. Just I want to hear some like really stupid ideas for shows if anyone wants to volunteer. Yes.
I have a web series in mind where a little werewolf boy goes across the country and discovers different cryptids, like Mothman and Bigfoot.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, let's go with that. This isn't something precious to you, or is it?
You can do whatever you want with it.
Okay. So, yeah, it's a great idea. So, I wanted to ask you, why does that idea excite you? Like, what connection do you feel to that idea?
I'm really into folklore. There's a lot of really interesting American urban legends. I have other ideas in like European folklore, and I like this idea of a kid who is not necessarily accepted by his peers, but does find acceptance in the weirder things of the world.
May I ask, did you experience this at any point in your childhood where you felt you weren't understood by your peers?
Yes.
So that's the good stuff. That's like, you don't want to distance yourself from your idea. You want to show people really why you're passionate. And, it has to be more than, well, I'm just into this, I'm into octopi or whatever. Like, you have to really try to dig deep down and see how you personally connect to it. Because people don't only want to know your idea, they want to know why are you bringing this idea to the table. So we have our werewolf, and you basically came up with the premise. It's a werewolf who feels like an outsider, though he hears about that there could be other misfits like him out there. And he goes cross country to find them and try to make some connections. So the next thing we have to think about is tone and format. Like whether it's adult, kids 6 to 11, like elementary school, preschool, or, this isn't a very common, like it's kind of hard to sell these shows, but teen, like Y7. So yeah, I wanted to ask you, who do you think the audience is for, if you could narrow it down a little?
Probably Y7 or 6 through 11. That'll be in the easier range.
Well, if you're going indie, doesn't really matter. In fact, it could be better to make it older.
That's true. That's a lot of what succeeded recently.
Yeah.
Indie stuff.
Yeah. So let's say it's for teens. Oh, that answers that question. Oh yeah, sorry, but the tone is more about what is the comedy like, the style, the tone of the show. If you can think of some other shows that are not exactly like it, but could live on the same planet, are there any that come to mind? It's okay if the answer is no.
Yeah, maybe the Cartoon Network sort of vibe.
Okay, Cartoon Network vibe, so maybe it has some of that in its DNA. And do you see these stories being, what length do you see these episodes being?
Fairly short, probably.
For YouTube?
Yeah, so we find like one new friend per episode.
That's cool.
5-10 minutes.
So 5 to 10 minutes. And then we decided who the show's for. And I'm just gonna take you through just if we wanted to take an idea and see how we could spin it for different age groups. Let's take this idea. I have an example that I have in my book here, but let's take your idea and see how we could spin it for different age groups. So for 6 to 11, I think that you could make it a little younger, which means that the humor would never get too edgy, you know, probably less like sexual themes and drug-related themes, obviously, but at the same time, you can have more sophisticated, I think, emotional stories that are appropriate for elementary age kids. They can totally get that and resonate with. So you want to think about if that boy, that werewolf boy is like 10 or 11, what kind of problems he would be dealing with. And if he couldn't drive cross country, so it would have to be, he would find a accomplice probably, an older accomplice, maybe not one of his parents, but a cool mentor. He would need to get permission from his parents, but I think it would have to be like, it would be cool if it was like someone he looked up to or something. It could also be one of his parents who he's close to and could be an older sibling. Older sibling, that's what we want. I think it would be an older sibling. And so this older sibling would be in support of his journey and be there for the highs and lows of it. So sometimes he might meet a creature that he doesn't connect with, you know, and it doesn't always go his way. And then how do you think we could do this for preschool? My mind automatically goes, just as just one example, monster daycare or preschool, where
Baby Bigfoot.
yeah, all the baby monsters you could do, baby folklore characters. But it would be more, the werewolf kids' problems would be more at the level of preschool age problems. So sharing and
sharing.
And understanding, you know, different things. But I think that would be a good direction to go in. And then for adults, I guess, do you have any ideas of how this could be super adult? Like,
I think I would include some like horror themes to it. A lot
that's
of
a good idea.
like, I think of Mothman in particular is kind of a cool but also scary figure. So like some like more intense scenes, but then eventually resolve themselves with comedy.
Yeah, and that's something definitely you can do for adults that you have to be careful with for kids. So it's not that they don't make scary cartoons for elementary school kids, but the scares have to be not too scary. But with adult, you can make it full-on horror, or however you want it to be. So I think that's a really good idea. And of course, the werewolf would be older, maybe early 20s, but dealing with the same themes of loneliness. And then for this idea, we have to think about why now. And this is one of the hardest questions you have to ask yourself and be real about. So you have to look at the landscape of what's out there right now and see if your idea still feels fresh to you. And how do you feel about that?
I think there is a really big theme of isolation and loneliness and not fitting in. Like even though we've had like anti-bullying measures and stuff and awareness and destigmatizing stuff, that there's still that need for connection. And I'm like, one of my favorite shows is The Owl House, and it has this theme in it where they say us weirdos gotta stick together. And I think that is a very powerful message to have.
Great, and yeah, I mean, I think especially now with what's going on in the world. We need to make these kinds of stories for people. But then even looking at things like, well, there hasn't been a road trip kind of show like this. And you want to kind of identify those things that would make it stand out so you can integrate it into your pitch. Like why your show is something we haven't seen before. Relevancy, that's what we just talked about. I think that idea sounds very relevant. But maybe you wouldn't want to like make a show about a guy who's just like trying to make it happen with his crush or something, like at this time, or something so tropey that goes back to like the 80s and is simple enough
Got
that
plenty of 80s inspiration lately.
yeah, just anything that we've seen a lot of, you want to stay away from. And so trying to find those areas that you haven't seen but would like to see more of. So yeah, those are the basic ingredients. What do you care about? What is the show? Who is it for? And why now? And then, of course, you have to develop your characters and develop your cast of characters so that they, contrast each other well, and each of the characters feel like they have a purpose for existing on your show. And kind of talk about, you have to figure out how the stories work, what kind of is the story engine, which means like, if you think of a car engine, it's like the motor that can keep producing more and more stories. Sometimes if you have a concept that is too limited, it becomes like too specific or too limited, it becomes hard to come up with that kind of like abundance of story ideas. And you kind of want to figure out, not that your show has to be like repetitive or too math-like, but kind of figuring out the breakdown of an episode, a typical episode. And that means that you can veer away from that typical episode, but that's your like flagship. This is what the show, an episode is like. And you'll want to come up with different story ideas, maybe like 3 to 5, and talk about the world that your characters live in. Trying to think if there's anything else. Yeah, you don't need to talk about every single detail. That's more if you go into development, but you need to show that you've thought about this idea fully, that it's not half-baked, that you've thought about, all those elements. And then, I guess, like, if I'm honest about my career, like I said, my biggest successes have been times when I've created something first as a proof of concept and then trying to sell it. So just if that's something you want to put in your back pocket, like just getting your idea out there, you really don't have to worry about people stealing your ideas. Like, I'll tell you this now, because similar ideas are happening constantly, and that's just not something you can control. But also, if you did see that someone copied you, like if DreamWorks saw your short and then came up, like it seemed too similar, like what are you gonna do, sue them? Like, it's just not worth, it wouldn't be worth the time and money and all of that. So I would just put that out of your mind and just like, the best thing you can do is get your stuff seen, and get your show idea out there. So, yeah, I think I'll leave it at that. Now go crazy. You can buy my book outside. I'm happy to sign it for you. I just make physical copies for book events like this, but I mostly sell ebooks, so you can also get an ebook. The physical copies are $35, and the ebooks are $29.99. And you can follow me on Instagram at Emily Brundige. And yeah, sign up for updates on my website. But now, do we have time for a little Q&A?
Yeah. If you guys have any questions, raise your hand.
When you're making the vampire episode, did you just have a dictionary open when you were doing all the words?
Did I what?
Like when you were doing like the spelling bee part, did you just have a dictionary open like to like the side of you as you were just writing the script?
Wait, I'm sorry, I'm not understanding the question.
When you were writing, you were writing the script for when they're.
Oh, did I have the dictionary open?
Yeah.
No, I just asked the internet questions like what are the longest words in the dictionary for that one, and just thought of like, you know, easy words and words that would be a little sophisticated. And obviously I picked keywords like defenestration, you know, for that moment. Yeah, go ahead.
What are the most common problems that come up when pitching a series?
The most common problems are really luck and timing, because that's just something out of your control. Even if you have a really good pitch, they might just not be looking for that at the time. But I'd say whenever you can get in a room with anyone is good, because you're making a connection. So even doing a pitch, if nobody buys your show, it's still great that you got yourself out there. Yes.
How much of the show / the story do you think you should have worked out by the time you go into pitch?
It's a great question. So this didn't used to be the way, but the kind of trend is to have a pilot episode chosen that you go into a little more detail about. So I would say like a 1-page, maybe 3 paragraphs or 4 paragraphs. And then with your so that's one you might need to think about a little more, beat by beat, so you know. But then you want to also provide sample episodes that I really think you don't have to have all figured out necessarily. You have to have like the character, the problem, the way that they go about the problem, but you don't necessarily have to give away what happens unless you feel like it helps sell the idea. But yeah, so you don't have to have a pilot script or anything ready unless you feel really strongly like you have a vision, you know what you want it to be, and that's why you want to provide a pilot script. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Over here.
Sorry. Is there a difference when the person pitching has industry experience but not writing experience? What's that? Are you at a disadvantage? What would that process be like versus someone who's already can like show like a script or a pilot?
Yeah. I would say you are at a little bit of a disadvantage, because if you don't have a proven record of writing professionally, then it's harder for executives to believe you can write. But sometimes you can just go in and say, you know, I'd love to be paired up with someone who could write this with me. And sometimes it can be even good to find a head writer who you could attach to it. So you show, I'm the director, the creator, executive producer, and this is the writer I want to work with. Sometimes that can be helpful. But if you have like storyboarding experience or any kind of story experience, I don't think you necessarily need to do that. They might eventually pair you up with someone. I see that happen a lot, but yeah. I'd say if you're an animator though, it might be good to think about that. Even just to write the Bible with you, and have them collaborate in that way, and then the idea that they would be your head writer if it got sold or whatever. Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have the mic. Go ahead.
Sorry. So you mentioned before how you were, DreamWorks kicked you off of the show, and in this day and age where a lot of corporations are kind of laying off workers or ending shows prematurely and such, is there anything that we as showrunners and animators and creators can do to sort of protect ourselves from that kind of risk, to make sure that the things we make aren't immediately canceled?
I mean, the only way you can do that if you did sell it with a studio is if you have a really great lawyer and they allow you to make those kinds of, details in the contract, those asks, like he has to be the showrunner, that kind of thing. Like, but usually, unless you have a lot of clout, you're like, Craig McCracken or whatever, Tycho ITV or something. Like, you usually can't make those asks. Like, I can't. There's always the chance that could happen to me. Sometimes it's like, they'll make a decision at 6 months, and if it's going smoothly at the 6-month point, then that's no longer a worry. They have to keep you on for the rest of the season. But I think, like, what I would recommend to you guys is really trying to, right now, produce things independently. I think that we're in an interesting time in the industry where there's like a shift because the studios are trying to figure out what's next as far as they're making profit off of streaming and shows and whatnot. And more resources are available to everyone. Like, I know AI sucks in some ways, but it's also like a way that could level the playing field, production-wise, and those like open, what is the open environment?
Like Fortnite?
No, it's like how that guy made Flow. Blender.
Blender's open source, yeah.
And then there's another one that lets you,
DaVinci?
no,
Unreal
DaVinci is
Engine.
also open.
this is not AI.
Unreal Engine 5.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Like, those are two great resources if you have those skills to make them work for you.
And DaVinci is a free editing software.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's great, yeah.
So it's becoming a lot easier to make things. You don't necessarily have to have as much money. But it's good to have some. And you can do Kickstarters if you feel like you have a community of friends who would want to help you fund this. There are different options.
We had a full talk at the expo last year. Can you believe that was just last year? Jeez, since it was decades ago, about AI. But then also about how what it's basically going to do is make indie creators and indie animators and people who just kind of get out there and are like, I've got me and 2 friends and we're going to make this thing. Who cares if someone picks it up or not? And I think if I'm understanding you correctly, like that's the crux of it. Like if you have somebody
That's I think the future. And you see channels like what's that really popular one? Glitch? Yeah, channels like Glitch that are basically becoming animation networks.
Yeah.
And I think too, you see Netflix, like YouTube has the most viewership over everything else. So Netflix is now buying shows that are already on YouTube just to get some of those eyeballs to Netflix, especially with kids. So it's an interesting time, but I find it exciting. An exciting time to like see what other ways we can make stuff.
It is, and and also, to your point, if you find someone who maybe already has a similar idea to you, even partnering up with them.
Yeah.
I mean, like, hey, I had a similar idea, would you be interested in, getting together? Because I think this is a great way you could integrate this into your show or into your channel or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So if you're a little afraid of starting from scratch, finding someone who's already got their feet off the ground a little bit and asking if you can hop in and help.
Yeah, and basically, I would also say if you're starting out, don't be picky about jobs in the industry or even like volunteering yourself to work on a project, because that's how you meet people. And it's really to your benefit if you can, if you're not working like full-time job, to do that kind of thing.
Also, to your point of like, why do we need it right now? I have a show that I've actually been pitching, and we heard back. So our show is about a little boy with Down syndrome, and he's the lead character, and it's really fun, and it has an imaginary world, and there's a whole element to it that's really, really fun. And we had PBS Kids tell us that they loved it, they thought it was a great concept, but they already had a show about a little girl who had autism. If you know anything about the disability community, those are very different things. But that's something that you have to think about when coming up with your show concept too. It's not just what's out there that's exactly like my concept, but what's adjacent to my concept.
Yeah.
And maybe if Nickelodeon has a show that's already adjacent or a show that already has characters that are similar, they're probably going to say no thank you because we already have a show that's too similar. So that's something to think about as well when you're pitching your show and who you want to talk to. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Hi, the two videos that you showed were really funny. I know that.
Oh, thank you.
But also, I was curious, you mentioned that when you are pitching to these studios, they buy like the option of developing it with you.
Yes.
And how much control, I guess, do you still have once you get creative?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that can really vary. Like, so at DreamWorks, for example, their style is kind of like the execs are also the creators. Like, the execs like to have a lot of creative control. So I kind of went into that situation a little naively, having like grown up with the culture of like Cartoon Network shows. I thought they wanted my voice because my voice is what sold the show, and it turned out they didn't care. So, but then other times, like with Goldie at Apple, I had the opposite experience where I had the best executives and they supported my vision like 100%, and it was always my decision in the end. Sometimes I would have to compromise if there were strong opinions, but overall, like, I had creative control, so.
And one last question, right next to you, Spencer.
Kind of building off that, I'm actually amazed at how close the Goldie short looks to the Goldie show. Since you have a drawing background, I mean, was the visuals part of your vision for that show? If you gave that to the animators, or was that something you did and consulted, and then Apple was like, we'll just take it?
Oh, it was all my choice. So the short, I wanted to look fresh and colorful and different, and I had an art director who I worked with to achieve that look that I wanted, and the town was kind of inspired by Pippi Longstocking, like kind of a quaint European town. And I worked with a friend to do the character designs for the short, who I really love, and was totally happy with the designs too. But then when I worked with my production studio, which was Mercury Filmworks in Canada, they have such great artists there, and basically they took what was already there and elevated it. To sum it up, like, you know, everything was on model, the animation was on model, and my art director on the show really developed out the town space to be a little more three-dimensional because it was very flat in the short. And yeah, everyone added. I mean, the really cool thing is when you do make a show, it's such a collaboration, and everyone really contributes something to make it a special show. That's how I felt about Goldie.
Awesome, guys, let's give a big round of applause to Emma.